little kickstart, a little perspective to set ourself in motion for the week to take care of ourselves, both spiritually, and to remind ourselves to be safe. And it's been a remarkable journey this year that we've been on. And with that in mind, I decided, as things are opening up, um, made sense that we're going to wind down Monday morning musings for the time being, and because we're going to get to be together in person. This has started over, you know, 6 weeks into the pandemic or so, realizing we needed more ways to connect and to be together in some way, in some creative way. So Monday morning musings, the idea bloomed. We talked about it in the office and brainstormed what else would be worthwhile and what other ways we can engage. And Rabbi Daniel started doing the Israel classes, and I thought this would be fun. Start the week, just be together in some way, a little teaching, a little sharing. And when the conversations came so naturally, most of the time I ended up spending with others, with colleagues and rabbis and Reform, Conservative, Orthodox, pastors, friends, executive directors, entrepreneurs, philanthropists, visionaries. Sometimes it was topical, like when Rabbi Mike Moskowitz came right in the beginning of Pride Month in June last year. At the end of May, he spoke. Or when Pastor Kenneth Flowers first came after George Floyd had been murdered. Those two were my 3-time guests with my brother, Rabbi Stephen. Other times it was about the holidays, and I'd be reflecting and thinking about that. But in one way or another, I found as I looked back on them, watched some of them, and thought, it became personal. The connections, the deeper conversations, and for that, as I look back, it was really a blessing in my life to be able to do this, to have this time, and it makes me realize even more and appreciate the good that we've been able to pull from these past 15 months, from our time managing our lives through a pandemic, right? Because looking back, it's been difficult and exhausting. And we can't account for the tremendous loss felt by so many, of family, of friends, of coworkers. In that perspective, it's unreal, unfathomable. 589,793 Americans have died as of yesterday's count. It's an unimaginable number. Remember when the number hit 100,000 and we were all like blown away by that, flabbergasted, couldn't imagine how this has occurred and what was going to be next. And then 200,000, and then it just accelerated. But in the midst of that and the connections we were still creating, another reality that we remembered and lived, especially at Shir Shalom this year, was that during the most difficult times in history, in Jewish history, we not only learned, but we innovated and we grew. We pivoted, found new ways to engage. If that weren't the case, we would still be offering animal sacrifices in Jerusalem at the Temple Mount, or we still want to do that. Some Jews may still want to do that, but not us. Because I'm pretty sure that we're happy to pray together at temple, or maybe in our garden, or for me, maybe my backyard to meditate. Time and again, we've been challenged in our history. And then look what we did. It's how we became the people who we are. And guess what? This year proved that to be the case once again. And personally, I could not be more proud of what we were able to do at Temple Shir Shalom this past year, from high holidays to Pesach Seders 2 times, to religious school with Shoresh on the grounds of the JCC day camp, being outside throughout the entire year, even when it got cold, to the Fruman Youth Program, SISTI, our high schoolers together every Sunday night outside, even last night when it was raining. We texted all the kids 2 hours before and said, okay, here are options, and here's what we're going to do. We're going to meet at Drake Park in the shelter there, do dinner outside, stay outside, be safe. And the majority of kids still all showed up, even when we changed the last minute. And we had fun, and they were social, and we ate. And then we had deep conversations about what's happening in Israel today and the anti-Semitism in our world. We're going to come back to that in our conversations this morning. What else this year? It's been remarkable. We became a food storage pantry in conjunction with Hazon, over 40,000 pounds of food have passed through our home at Temple on the way to get to those navigating food insecurity. At the same time, the other part of the social hall had our preschool pods. We couldn't be where we usually are because of the pandemic, of course, and so we found ways to be together. Smaller classes, fewer people, but insulated and safe. And yeah, it was a lot of hard work, weekly, daily, actually. But we kept making the choice to keep going, to figure it out. And as one of our teachers shared with us yesterday, no doubt, we not only got through, but we are stronger and more connected as a result. We created memories, good memories, happy memories, Jewish memories. We learned again how we can get through a crisis together as a community. And that really means something. And look, maybe I'm being so reflective and introspective because I know we're on the cusp of really opening back up in our world. And maybe it's because I just got back from my daughter Ellie's college graduation, which was a spectacular experience, especially for us parents, putting things in perspective. Love, enjoying, learning, seeing how everything came together at that moment. It was affirming for the success of a university to do that for Elon, because they too lived by an adage that I think has been important for us at Temple this year. It's what I was taught, what I learned from those in improvisational comedy and improv, the yes and philosophy. And no matter what, you're not going to say no. No is a stopper. It ends a process. But yes keeps it going. Even more yes and innovates. Again, Judaism has survived because in the best of moments, in our most difficult of times, we've said yes and. Temple Shir Shalom has had such an impactful, successful year because we've said yes and. It's what keeps me going still today. It's so relevant as we look through the lens of our history. But think of our lives. Think of what it means for us. Think of the different times that we've held on to that and pivoted and figured out what's next, rather than just shutting it down and saying no. It's important in our lives, our relationships. It's important to keep ourselves on top of that. And I think as well, it's something that when we look at the state of Israel today, it's why Israel's still here. I mean, the miracles, the successes, whether it was becoming a state in 1948 or surviving through 1967 in the Six-Day War, time and again, everything was stacked against Israel, but people said yes and. It's the entrepreneurial spirit of Israel and the successes that they continue to have. Look, I am glad that a ceasefire was agreed upon on Friday morning. No one, I hope, wants to see the death of anyone, right? That we're not praying for that. We're praying for peace. We're praying for life. We don't want innocent Palestinians who are trapped in Gaza to have to be killed in the midst of this. That's not the hope of it whatsoever. Rather, it's a hope for everyone to have a life that is successful and a life that is affirming, right? But Israel also has the ability and the right to defend itself when missiles are flying into Israel. And it is so alarming how the narrative has been shifted so strongly against Israel, but really against Jews in the world. And whether it's Jews attacked in Los Angeles or in London or in New York, or even in Detroit, as people are driving down Woodward with flags and signs saying Free Palestine, not realizing what Free Palestine means, I think, for a lot. Free Palestine as a movement has in its words the eradication of Israel as a state. So that isn't something that we can hold on to. Yeah, we want Palestinians to be free. We want Palestinian Israelis to live alongside Jews. And I'm the first to admit that there are times that I'm concerned and not in agreement with Israel's positions as a government. Just like I would say there are times I'm not in agreement with the United States government and its positions too. But it doesn't mean I don't love Israel. I don't care deeply for Israel. I read something this week I found very powerful that I wanted to share. and circle back on and think about Israel and where the hope comes from as well. It was written by Yossi Klein Halevi, and this essay appeared in the New York Times and a few other places too. I'm going to quote from this and read this to you. The framers of Israel's Declaration of Independence defined Israel as both Jewish and democratic, the homeland of all Jews, whether or not they were Israeli citizens, the state of all its citizens, whether or not they were Jews. An Israel that would no longer regard itself as a continuity of the Jewish story and protector of the world's vulnerable Jews would lose its soul. An Israel that would no longer aspire to fulfill democratic values would lose its mind. Balancing those two increasingly contentious but foundational elements of national identity defines my Israeli commitment. This is him speaking. There are voices on the left and the right who call for abolishing either Israel's Jewish identity or its democratic identity. I stand with the large, if embattled, camp of political centrists that insist on holding both. We know that Israel's long-term viability depends on managing the tensions inherent in our identity and reality. I'm going to leave his text. The majority of Israel's political centrists, despite what the government's doing today. Back to him. For Israelis to form a shared civic identity, Jews need to fulfill Israel's founding promise to grant full equality to all citizens, reassure Arabs that Israeli is not a synonym for Jew. Arabs need to come to terms with the fact that Israel will not abandon its Jewish identity and its commitments. And here's where personally he speaks to his life. In my building in Jerusalem's French Hill neighborhood, nearly half the families are Arab Israeli, lawyers, doctors, civil servants who bought apartments here because they want a share of the Israeli dream. The violence that erupted in the poor mixed neighborhoods would be unthinkable in middle-class French Hill. When Arabs and Jews meet in the parking lot, we sigh and reassure each other that things will get better because they always do, and we have no choice. Most Israelis, Arabs, and Jews are practiced in the habit of decency, but we're also practiced in self-justification. We know routines of neighborliness, but rarely question the other's reality. We avoid hard questions that threaten our certainties, our insistence on the absolute justice of our side. What it's like to be a Palestinian citizen of a Jewish state that occupies your family, what it's like to be a Jew who's finally come home only to live under constant siege. The current violence wasn't triggered by one event, but in part by our inability to ask those questions. Perhaps we can begin building a better Israel from that place of shared brokenness. I found those words to be incredibly powerful because in the reality of shared brokenness are his words of hope, that Jews, Arabs, Israelis, both living together and respecting one another. We're seeing, the extremes right now happening, and that's a challenge for Israel. And we need to focus on that centrist mentality that brings people together and how important that is for Israel to survive. As far as the anti-Semitism that social media has helped propagate in our world right now, and the idea that Hamas isn't a terrorist organization, but liberating Palestinians who are oppressed, we need to speak out against that. When we hear things that are inaccurate or untrue, we need to talk about that. We need to share the realities of that. We also need to make sure that social media isn't constantly used to promote falsehoods. So it's a challenge. It's a great challenge. And the organizations like Hamas and Iran, with their help, have used that well, unfortunately. And so that's something that we have to continue to be informing others about and understanding of too. So with all of that in mind, it's, something we'll continue talking about, and I imagine will be a big focus of our time together this summer. And so let's use that as a moment for our hope that we're going to be coming back together. Governor Whitmer announced on Thursday changing protocols coming up on June 1st and then July 1st. And so it's to give us more opportunities. And so the hope is that our high holidays will look possibly a lot more like they did in 2019 than they did in 2020. 57, 79, they did 57, 80. That's what we're gearing up towards now. That's what we're talking about, figuring out the details, how to best do this together. And it's what excites us as well. So those are my thoughts today. I mentioned before, if you wanted to throw a question out there, I said that in a text to someone, please do so. Brian's sending them to me. But this gives me a chance to thank those who help make Monday Morning Musings something worthwhile and meaningful and helpful and out to all of you. So first to Brian Fishman, who I think every Monday has been behind the scenes helping make this happen and promoting this from our platforms. So thank you to our executive director at Temple Shir Shalom, Brian Fishman, for making this work so well throughout the entire year. And of course, working with Rabbi Cantor and me and the rest of us on our team at Temple to make everything else come together successfully. And to all of you, so many who've logged in repeatedly on Monday mornings. I really appreciate that. Got to give a shout out to Paulette. I think every Monday preparing for this. So thank you, Paulette. And also, I know Betsy's there almost always, and Leah, a few others who always give shout outs, very affirming. As I said, I wasn't sure what we were beginning. It was a way to connect, but the comments and the questions and the engagement that came from so many of you made this more meaningful for me, right? It made me be able to have a chance to teach. And so Brian reminded me that Ray is often with us and Kathy is often with us too. So thank you. And I know there's many others, but those are probably the culprits who've been with me most frequently each week. And I appreciate that. So we'll take a break. It's summertime. Next Monday is Memorial Day. Hey, an announcement at 12 o'clock on Memorial Day, there is a service with the Jewish war veterans that Arthur Fishman and the war veterans have asked me to help conduct at Machpelah Cemetery outdoors. So it is open to come and support and be a part of that. It will also be promoted on YouTube Live, the Shir Shalom platform too. So we'll be doing that as well. We are going to start our services together outdoors at Temple Shir Shalom on June 4th, that Friday night service. That's the first one that's officially scheduled, a 6:30 service. We ask you to RSVP so we can make sure our numbers are manageable for the amount of space we have as we socially distance, still together in the best way. It's going to be a learning experience. We're still most used to wearing masks, and we're still used to sort of keeping our distance from each other. I think we're going to get comfortable being close to each other again, realizing that we need that. But we'll see. We're going to figure it out together because you let us know how it works and what isn't working, and we can figure out and say yes, and then see what's next for us. So thanks for making a lot of the success possible in your engagement and the time together on Monday Morning Musings. And if it's something that you want to see continue in the future, let me know. We're going to try new things, different things, fun things in the upcoming year, different ways to connect over the summer months as well, different opportunities for us to be together in person and share and learn, be spiritual, and make time holy. So have a safe, good week, everyone. Take care of yourselves, and I look forward to seeing you in person, if not June 4th, at one of our Shabbat services or opportunities over the summer.